Everything you know about the Holocaust is wrong. In 1933, as Adolf Hitler seized power and began persecuting Jews, the Nazi regime was secretly signing cooperation agreements with Zionist organizations, not tolerating them, not ignoring them, actively collaborating with them. For 6 years, while the world watched anti-Semitic laws strip Jewish rights, the Third Reich worked hand-in-hand with Jewish nationalist leaders to transfer German Jews to Palestine. They called it the Havara Agreement. The same Nazi bureaucrats who would design gas chambers were sitting at tables with Zionist leaders, shaking hands, signing contracts, splitting profits from population transfer. This wasn't wartime desperation. This collaboration began the moment Hitler took power, creating the foundation later used to orchestrate the Holocaust itself. Tonight, we expose one of history's most buried secrets. A story so explosive that Israeli and German governments spent decades hiding it. But the documents survive. The bank records exist. This is how Nazi Germany became the unlikely godfather to Israel, and how Jewish immigration machinery became the blueprint for Jewish extermination. Berlin, January 1933. As Hitler becomes chancellor, something extraordinary happens in the shadows. While Jewish families pack in terror, secret meetings begin in the Reich Ministry of Economics. Picture this haunting scene. Nazi officials in brown uniforms sit across from men in Orthodox Jewish attire and business suits. Between them lie documents sealing millions' fate. Outside, stormtroopers chant death to the Jews. Inside, those same Jews negotiate business deals with the regime planning their destruction. At the center sits Chaim Arlesorov, architect of an impossible alliance. Born in Ukraine in 1899, he was a walking contradiction. A Marxist who championed capitalism when it served Jewish interests. A pacifist advocating armed resistance when survival demanded it. Arlesorov had piercing eyes that saw around history's corners. He was ruthlessly pragmatic, willing to shake hands with anyone for Jewish survival. Looking across at Nazi officials, he made a calculation echoing through generations. He understood what others refused to accept. Hitler wasn't temporary. This was Europe's new reality, and Jewish survival depended on adaptation, not resistance. The logic was ice cold. If Nazis wanted Jews out of Germany and Zionists wanted Jews in Palestine, why not profit from mutual interest? The Havara Agreement, signed August 1933, was an intricate mechanism benefiting Nazi Germany, enriching Zionist organizations, and theoretically saving Jewish lives, while giving Nazis invaluable experience in mass population transfer logistics. Here's how this devil's bargain worked. German Jews emigrating to Palestine deposited life savings into special blocked accounts. These funds purchased German goods shipped to Palestine. Upon arrival, Jews received credits minus substantial fees, enriching German and Zionist institutions. Nazis got desperately needed foreign currency during international boycotts. German manufacturers found new markets. Zionist leaders got skilled immigrants with industrial capital to build their paradise. A three-way when requiring one small moral compromise. German Jews became active participants, sustaining the Nazi economy, destroying Jewish life in Europe. If this revelation shocked you, smash that like button and tell us in the comments about these impossible moral choices. The agreement was controversial immediately. Jewish organizations worldwide implemented boycotts against German goods, trying to strangle the Nazi regime. Havara didn't just break these boycotts. It turned German Jews into the Nazis' most effective sanctions busters. Vladimir Jabotinsky, revisionist Zionism leader and future father of Israel's right-wing parties, was furious. He called it surrender to Nazi blackmail and betrayal of Jewish solidarity worldwide. Jewish communities from New York to Warsaw condemned collaboration with evil. But Arlesorov and mainstream Zionist leadership saw 50,000 potential immigrants and 60 million Reichsmarks in capital transfer. They saw German machinery making Palestine economically viable. They saw, in every German equipment shipment arriving in Haifa, the skeleton of a future Jewish state. Were they heroes making impossible choices, or collaborators enabling the regime attempting to exterminate their people? Many Nazi officials involved weren't rabid anti-Semites from Hollywood depictions. They were educated bureaucrats who believed they were solving the Jewish question through humane immigration rather than violence. Hans Hartenstein, the Nazi official overseeing Havara implementation, maintained warm relationships with Zionist counterparts. His correspondence reveals a man taking personal pride in the program's efficiency. These weren't Hollywood Nazis. These were intelligent men convincing themselves they were humanitarian while laying genocide's groundwork. By 1935, the system functioned with German efficiency. Factories retooled for Palestinian markets. Jewish immigrants arrived as skilled workers with capital, not desperate refugees. Nazis earned foreign currency while solving their Jewish problem. But something darker was taking shape. Heinrich Himmler, SS architect and future Holocaust overseer, watched Havara with cold scientific attention. He studied mass population transfer logistics, not for humanitarian reasons, but for much larger, sinister applications. The bureaucratic mechanisms, transportation networks, documentation systems, processing thousands efficiently through administrative bottlenecks, all was being refined for genocide. Havara was becoming a pilot program for the Holocaust. Join our community of history seekers by subscribing, because this story gets even more disturbing. Meanwhile, in Palestine, German Jewish immigrants transformed the landscape. These highly educated professionals and business people arrived with substantial capital and industrial expertise. The Yeks brought distinctly German organization and systematic planning. They established industries becoming Israel's economic backbone, founded educational institutions producing scientific achievements, created organizational culture allowing a tiny nation to survive surrounded by hostile neighbors. Dr. Arthur Ruppin kept meticulous records of every Havara immigrant. His files reveal systematic selection based not just on desperate need to escape, but on potential contribution to building a Jewish state. Doctors, engineers, scientists were recruited and fast-tracked. The elderly, poor, sick, and politically unreliable were often left behind to face whatever awaited them in Nazi Germany. This wasn't just immigration policy. This was social engineering on a national scale, conducted in partnership with the Nazi regime. The human cost became clear June 16, 1933. Chaim Arlesorov was strolling Tel Aviv beach with his wife when two men approached, spoke briefly in Hebrew, then fired twice at point-blank range. He died 2 days later, age 34. The assassination shockwaved the Jewish world. Who killed the man trying to save German Jews by dealing with their persecutors? 3 revisionist movement members were arrested, the same opponents who denounced Havara as treason. Evidence was circumstantial, testimonies contradictory. The Jewish national movement was tearing itself apart over how to survive existential threats. One accused, Avraham Stavsky, later became an Israeli independence hero. Another maintained innocence until death. The truth about who killed Arlesorov remains officially unsolved. But his death didn't end Havara. It accelerated it. By 1937, as Europe lurched toward war, Havara had processed 40,000 immigrants and transferred hundreds of millions in today's currency. But the situation was deteriorating. A young SS officer named Adolf Eichmann visited Palestine to study Havara firsthand. His report, discovered in captured archives, makes chilling reading. The Havara system demonstrates that large-scale Jewish population movements are feasible and profitable. These principles could be applied to much larger populations and more permanent solutions. The future Holocaust architect was learning through collaboration with the very people he'd later attempt to exterminate. What do you think? Was Havara necessary evil saving lives, or dangerous compromise helping Nazis' perfect mass population control? Let us know in the comments. World War II's outbreak ended Havara, but not before fundamentally altering Nazi Jewish policy and Zionist settlement. As tanks rolled across Poland, collaboration architects found themselves on opposite sides of humanity's greatest divide. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's future first prime minister and pragmatic Havara supporter, made a haunting 1938 statement. "If I could save all German children by bringing them to England, and only half by transporting them to Palestine, I'd choose Palestine." He wasn't callous. He was calculating long-term Jewish survival. Rescuing Jews meant nothing without creating a sovereign state, guaranteeing permanent security. Nazi bureaucrats who'd administered Havara now managed increasingly sinister programs. The same skills facilitating immigration were applied to ghetto deportations, then death camps. Hans Hartenstein, who'd maintained cordial Zionist relations, was promoted to oversee Western European deportations. His meticulous record-keeping made him terrifyingly efficient at organizing mass murder. Immigration bureaucracy evolved seamlessly into extermination bureaucracy. The full truth emerged decades later as historians accessed classified archives. Edwin Black's 1963 research for the Transfer Agreement shocked Holocaust historians. Collaboration was far more extensive than realized. Bank records showed Havara handled not just documented immigrants, but enormous Jewish wealth transfers. Some estimates suggest 8% of all German Jewish assets passed through Havara accounts. More disturbing were documents showing some Zionist leaders actively opposed international rescue efforts, competing with Palestine immigration. When Americans proposed bringing refugees to the U.S., some Zionist officials argued this would undermine the Jewish state case. The same calculus justifying Nazi cooperation was limiting Jewish survival options. Most explosive was Adolf Eichmann's 1961 trial testimony. The Holocaust architect spoke matter-of-factly about cooperating with Zionist officials, describing them as pragmatic partners in population management. His casual references to Palestinian visits and Jewish agency relationships created public relations nightmares. Much testimony was classified, research discouraged. The truth was too politically explosive. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because this story's final chapter reveals how 1933 Berlin compromises continue shaping Middle Eastern politics. Hannah Arendt, covering the Eichmann trial, wrote, "Havara revealed something uncomfortable about human nature, our capacity to rationalize any collaboration when survival seems at stake. The question isn't whether Zionist leaders were right or wrong. It's whether any of us would have acted differently facing certain death versus morally ambiguous survival. Today, as Israel faces existential threats and makes controversial security decisions, Havara's ghost hovers over Israeli political culture. The willingness to make moral compromises for strategic advantage, accepting international isolation when necessary. Believing Jewish security depends on Jewish power, not Gentile goodwill. All trace back to those 1933 Berlin negotiations. Palestinians, who had no voice in Havara negotiations, but whose lands became destinations for German immigrants, remain perhaps the most enduring victims. Industrial infrastructure, planning expertise, and capital from Havara immigrants significantly helped establish irreversible facts on the ground. In Middle Eastern refugee camps, Palestinians still live with consequences of decisions made in German offices nearly a century ago. Yet results are undeniable. 60,000 German Jews who escaped through Havara survived. Their descendants became scientists, artists, soldiers, citizens of thriving democracy. Industries and institutions they built became foundations of a nation absorbing millions of Jewish refugees worldwide. Havara saved lives while enabling genocide, built a nation while displacing another people, demonstrated Jewish adaptability while revealing moral vulnerability. A perfect reflection of moral complexity defining human existence, where good and evil rarely come pure, where survival often requires dancing with devils, and where ideological consistency's price may be measured in human lives. So here's the haunting question. It's not whether Zionist leaders negotiating with Nazis were right or wrong. It's whether we've learned enough from their impossible dilemma to make better choices when our survival is at stake. In a world where democracies face threats again, where authoritarian regimes expand power, where peoples face potential extinction, what would you sacrifice for survival? What moral compromises would you make? What devil's deals would you sign? These aren't just historical questions. They're questions defining our future and human civilization itself. What do you think? Have we learned the right lessons from Havara, or are we doomed to repeat the same moral compromises facing existential threats? Let us know in the comments below, and join our community by subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Because history's most important lessons are often the most uncomfortable ones, and ignoring them may cost more than we can imagine.